Hi there everyone, it's Marc Laurenson here from Sydney Astrology School, and thank you for joining me as we begin our Neptune through the Houses series, and this is episode number 1. So in our very first episode we're going to be looking at Neptune in the 4th house. Okay, so when we're thinking about the 4th house, we're thinking about the area of sky that's as far away from our natal position as possible. It's actually on the other side of the world. So when you think of Neptune being here, you're thinking of that planet being in the deepest emotional recesses of who we are. So I like to think of the MCIC axis, the meridian line, like the trunk of a tree of the chart. And of course the IC, the cusp of the 4th house, is the root system of the chart. It is embedded, it is deeply emotionally embedded in the past. And it's emotionally embedded in what makes us who we are and where we come from. So a lot of people already know that the 4th house has a lot to do with family. It has a lot to do with heritage. It has a lot to do with our generational background. It has a lot to do with our culture. It has a lot to do with our childhood, our early childhood. It has a lot to do with our parenting. One particular parent is generally the father. But it's a very, very deeply vulnerable place, as I said, and it's got a feeling of a lot of early conditioning, emotional conditioning, that we often have to deal with much later in life. We tend to carry it through. And so when we've got Neptune in this particular house, this area, I feel, I'm going to start with this to begin with. I'm going to start with the higher understanding of what we need to learn and the stuff that we need to incorporate for our higher good with Neptune in the 4th house. So if you have Neptune in the 4th house, this is about a radical sense of forgiveness. This is about a radical sense of compassion. This is about a radical sense of sensitivity, spiritual sensitivity. This is about coming into a place of open-heartedness and being able to understand and be able to be, I want to say, spiritually connected to your early environment, the people involved, the way you were brought up, and as a feeling of being able to see that from the soul perspective. Okay. Now, as I said, this is the highest version of what I truly believe Neptune in the 4th house is about. So if you can look at your family, everybody in it, if you can look at your childhood, whatever went down in your childhood, if you can look at all the situations, the circumstances, the pain or the wounding, all the good times as well, if you can look at it from what I would call a spiritual distance, if you can actually see it for what it was on a soul level, and that you actually chose this, you actually chose these people, you actually chose this circumstance to come into this lifetime for your higher good, for your higher learning, regardless of how difficult it might have been. This is exactly what you needed. It was basically perfect. There's something about the Neptune in the 4th house that is feeling at peace now. It has that feeling of coming into a feeling of kind of like inner, coming home to its soul self. If you can actually come into that kind of emotional understanding, if you can come into that side kind of spiritual connectedness with the early environment, with your background, with your heritage, with your past, if you can actually do that, then I find that Neptune in the 4th house for you will be one of the most beautiful places in your chart. Now, I want to actually start talking about the areas that Neptune can play out in for us that may actually bring in particular experiences that we're going to have to deal with. So all the stuff that I just talked about can kick in. Okay. When you have Neptune in the fourth house, it can happen in so many different ways. Now, I know lots of people with Neptune in the fourth house. I also have done a lot of readings, of course, with people with Neptune in the fourth house. And it's so interesting at the different ways it plays out, but it's always very, very Neptunian. Okay. So the first one is a feeling of not having a strong identity within the family. Almost feeling like you've morphed into the family, you're part of the family, you're part of the furniture, that kind of thing. You don't have a strong individual identity on your own. You're defined by the family and who the family is. So it's almost like there's no division between you and the family. And so actually trying to break away and actually trying to find who you are outside of the family can sometimes be kind of challenging for a lot of people with Neptune in the fourth house, okay? Another thing with Neptune in the fourth house is a lack of boundaries in the family. A feeling of, I want to say, there was a person that I know who just didn't want to go to school. And his mother just didn't care if he went to school or not. And so he would stay home all the time. Because there was no discipline or no, there was no kind of boundary on that level of him having to do what he was told to do. So it was kind of like this feeling of he could do whatever he wanted to do, but at the same time, it didn't actually make him feel terribly loved or terribly connected. It actually made him feel more lost. And loss is another feeling. There's a feeling of being lost in your own family. There's a feeling of not having an anchor, not having anything, not having a support system, not having anything to really cling on to, actually feeling like you're out there on your own, floating around in the ocean by yourself, even though there's a whole lot of people around you. It's a feeling of possibly going under and crossing your fingers that somebody, is going to actually throw a lifebuoy to you. But that can sometimes be not guaranteed, with Neptune in the fourth house. Other things with Neptune in the fourth house could be addiction. I know many, many people who are brought up in families where addiction was rife, and it's not always going to be pills and booze. It can be addiction on many, many levels. And so addiction, that feeling of growing up in an area or in a place where that becomes a major focus, that's also a very Neptune in the fourth house manifestation. Neptune in the fourth house can also be a feeling of being the sacrificer. If you have Neptune in the fourth house, it's that feeling of you always having to give of yourself. You're the one who has to be the one who misses out or loses out. You have to sacrifice yourself for the family, or you have to sacrifice yourself for a parent. That can come into Neptune in the fourth house as well. Another thing with Neptune in the fourth house could be the elusive parent, particularly the elusive father. And I know somebody with Neptune in the fourth house who believed that they were brought up by one particular man who was his father, and he found out in adulthood that wasn't his father at all, that his father was completely somebody else. Many people with Neptune in the fourth house have missing fathers, and if they're not actually missing from the family scene itself, they have elusive fathers. They have fathers that are emotionally out of contact. Now, I know another person who says he had a wonderful childhood, which I'll get to in a minute. But his father was never around, even though he loved his father and he can only say good things about his father. His father was a traveling doctor, and so his father was away a lot of the time. And so he never really got to see his father all that much. And so it was the whole elusive father syndrome going on there, even though his father wasn't separated from the family as such. So I want to go down the other extreme with Neptune in the fourth house now. There's a lot of people, and quite a lot of people with Neptune in the fourth house, that live in this kind of Disney-esque idea of family. You know, it's almost like everything was so beautiful, everything was so perfect. It was like living a Disney story. You know, I love my childhood. You know, I love my parents. My parents end up becoming, people's parents, with this particular way of looking at Neptune in the fourth house, become like Disney kind of kings and queens. You know, they have this kind of, they can't do anything wrong, ethereal quality about them. And I want to say this could be really nice in some way, because I can see Neptune trying to come into these people's lives to get them to see their family from a spiritual or soulful perspective, which I said at the beginning. But there is something about this that doesn't connect to the reality of things either. And so sometimes it can be a bit of a thud to the ground. It could be a bit of a balloon drop to, back to earth again. When certain things happen in the family that can disappoint them, or certain things can happen in the family that they've put so much of their heart into, or their dreams into, that never really end up living up to the expectation, or never really living up to the Disney happy ending. So sometimes that can be a little bit a little bit sad for a lot of people that live there. But at the same time, I often find that people who have more Disney-esque, or more everything was beautiful Pollyanna kind of approach to Neptune in the fourth house, I feel it is a kind of like a safety mechanism. It's got a feeling of them being able to hold on to something, and I want to say that possibly in a way that is that can be kind of a positive thing for a lot of people. Because I find that a lot of people with Neptune in the fourth house can go through some pretty difficult times. Neptune in the fourth house can actually make you feel in a way that you don't belong anywhere. You're looking for really where you belong, and it feels like wherever I go, in the home, in the family, the background, it feels like it doesn't feel like I'm coming into a beautiful, soft, calm, peaceful place. It always feels like I'm free falling, or it always feels like I can't grip onto anything. It always feels like there's something here that always makes me feel that anything can happen at any moment. It just feels a little bit like something underneath me can give way. And I feel that happens a lot with people with Neptune in the fourth house. Another thing with Neptune in the fourth house could actually be a spiritual family. A family where people are psychic, or people who love astrology, or people who do tarot, you know what I mean? There could be a thing passed down from family to family, generation to generation, that might carry a kind of like a spiritual or esoteric kind of signature. That can come through the family line as well. But what I want to say most about Neptune in the fourth house is I feel that coming home, trying to find home somewhere, is always going to be, I want to say, challenging for people because it's not outside of them. Neptune in the fourth house is internal. So there's a feeling of having to come home to your soul, come home to spirit, come home to your connection with the universe. If you are going to look for it in a home itself, it would have to be in a location that has some kind of I would want to say soul or beauty or water or scenery around it. It has to be like a sanctuary. It has to feel like a place where you can come into and you can actually start to feel immediately connected with your inner self. And so that would be very, very important for Neptune in the fourth house people. I also want to go down the road of saying Neptune in the fourth house is always going to want you in some kind of way to become very, I want to say very intuitively, sensitively connected to your environment. I think you already have that. I think you already have this inner sensitivity to your home, your close environment. You pick up on energy, you pick up on the sensitivity of what's going on around you. And I want to always say that can be used in such beautiful ways. It can be used in ways where you can actually extend this feeling out to make people feel loved, to make people feel safe, to make people feel secure, to mother people, to care for people, to look after people. You have that naturally with Neptune in the fourth house. And so the more you can honor that, the more you can understand that in yourself, emotionally and spiritually understand that in yourself, the more you can feel safe with that in yourself, and the more you can extend that out to others to make them feel exactly the same way, then I feel that your Neptune in the fourth house is going to be one of the most beautiful parts of your